Matt, I just want to make sure you can hear me okay? Yeah, okay. Okay. So thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Nicole Beagin. I'm the communications specialist with the School of Business. I just want to let all of our panelists know your cameras are on. You can mute and unmute yourselves as you see fit. The attendees are all muted and you will not be able to see them. They will, however, be able to submit questions to us via the chat and Q&A feature. I will hand it off for now to Emily to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you to our panelists for joining. It's really great to have you all with us. My name is Emily Behn. I'm the Assistant Director of Employer Relations over in the Career and Leadership Development Office. I'm also the liaison to the School of Business.
Great. So again, we're going to kick this off. We'll have our panelists introduce themselves. Emily will start the discussion with a few questions, but we want to encourage all of our attendees to submit questions or comments through the chat or Q&A feature throughout the discussion. This way we can weave them in to our chat throughout the event. And again, this panel will be recorded, so I will be able to post it on the School of Business website if you'd like to refer back to it or share it with anyone that wasn't able to attend this evening. So I would like to turn it over to our panel. I can start with Kathleen, if you'd like to introduce yourself to everyone.
Technology. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Kathy Fitzpatrick. I am not an alumni of TCNJ, but 4 of the 5 members of my management team are, and we do a lot of recruiting and hiring from TCNJ. I am the Chief Financial Officer for Management Planning, Inc. We are a boutique consulting firm that offers business valuation services for private companies. We've been in business for over 80 years. And I've been with the firm for about 2 years. I am a graduate of Rider University, my undergraduate. I'm an accountant by training. I'm a CPA. I have over 30 years of business experience. Got my chops working for a large Fortune probably 50 company or less, Johnson & Johnson. I spent over 25 years there in a variety of finance and HR roles, and made the transition about 6 years ago to the small business environment, and been able to take all of my finance, human resource skills. I even manage IT for my current organization. So it's been a wonderful experience, really enjoying the small business environment.
Thank you. And moving over to Jennifer.
Yeah, so I am an alumni, Jennifer Graf. I graduated with a finance degree, actually got recruited off campus using career services. I worked for Goldman Sachs for a little over 10 years, then left to work for a hedge fund, and I'm there now, Renaissance Technologies. Got my degree in finance, I think I mentioned, and then actually went back part-time while I was at Goldman and got my MBA part-time at Rutgers. But throughout the course of my career, I have really spent time kind of working with undergrads, just kind of really hoping to give them the same opportunities I had. I feel really lucky that I got recruited out of TCNJ to have the opportunity to work on Wall Street, and have been really fortunate in my career from that point on, and just always happy to kind of pay it forward and work with undergraduates in any way possible.
Thank you so much. And Matt?
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. Hi, Matt Conrad, class of 2011, studied health and exercise science teaching, physical education at TCNJ. Coming out of college, moved to Miami, taught with Teach for America in the inner city down there for a few years, and then was recruited by IBM, moved up to Hoboken, been with IBM in a couple different sales roles for the last 6 years, did a leadership development program when I was starting out as well. I currently manage our relationships with Tiffany & Co., Colgate-Palmolive, and the Campbell Soup Company. Thanks for having me.
Great. So Emily, why don't you go ahead and kick off the discussion?
Absolutely. So I do just want to say, I just got a notice that my internet is unstable. So if I cut in or out, just know that that's what's going on. And hopefully if it does cut out, I'll be able to rejoin quickly. So I did just want to kind of get a pulse on the attendees that we have here today. We have close to 30, we do have now 30 attendees, which is fantastic. So let me pull up my screen so that we can ask a few questions of our audience. Okay. So can you all see? Okay. So we have a few questions here. So our first one, there we go. So you'll see here, you'll log in on your phone to menti.com and use the code 9019 for the next couple questions. As you guys enter your answers here, they should pop up in real time so we can all see what you all think. So I'm just curious, before we dive in, this panel is about internships. If you have an internship, how do you make the most of it this summer? If you don't have an internship quite yet, how can you get it? Or what can you do if you aren't able to get an internship this summer? So we're talking about internships, but what does that mean? So think about a word, a quick phrase. When someone says internship to you, what does that bring to mind? Learning experience. Good. Any other words? Time, opportunity, connections, gaining experience, commitment. These are great. Resume builder, networking. Okay, fantastic. Oh, there's still more trickling in. Okay, hopefully everyone can see these: experience, learning, opportunities, connections, commitment, desirability. Nice, I like it. Connections to be hired. Okay, we're gonna move on to our next slide here. Hopefully, here we go. So just to, again, get a pulse of who is on the video today, if you could share with us what school year you are currently in. Okay. So far, mostly sophomores. Okay. Give a few more seconds, see if any other trickle in. Okay. All right, so this is good. So mostly sophomores, a few first-year students, a few juniors, and a couple of seniors as well. All right. Next slide. All right, so next question is, what best describes your current situation? This will hopefully help us guide our conversation today. Deciding, if we're looking more, how should we get an internship? If you have an internship, how can you make the most of it this summer? Looks like most of us are falling into the still looking or looking because your offer was rescinded. Okay. Okay, so for those that had your offer, well, we don't have anyone who has a current offer. So we'll skip this slide. But
Emily,
Yeah.
if you see in the Q&A, someone had submitted a question. I think that they did have, or they have an offer, but they haven't heard about the status. So that might count. I don't know.
Someone who has yet to hear from their company about the status of their start date. If you're not sure of the status of your update, I would reach out to the recruiter or HR manager that you have been in touch with throughout your search process. They're going to be the best person for you to figure out what your start date is. Thanks, Nicole. Okay. We're going to skip the next question because it was geared towards students who have an internship. So we'll move to the next one, which is just kind of looking at what is your top concern right now with your internship plans? Where are you feeling stuck? Again, this might help us determine where the conversation goes today. So where, are you stuck in the search process, right? Like where do you start to find opportunities? Maybe it's your application, getting your resume and cover letter ready. Maybe it's interviewing, right? Like how do I interview and come across well, show my personality, my skills and experiences virtually? There we go, good. Connections, how do I start networking online when I can't meet people in person? Good. Okay, I'm gonna let a couple more come in here. Okay, so networking, where do I start? Where do I find opportunities? Okay. Good. Okay. Well, our hope is today, by the end of this conversation, that you'll have a little bit of a better feel about your concerns here. And of course, if you do not, you can always request an appointment with one of the advisors in the Career Center. We are here throughout the summer, so use us, right? All right, so we'll jump back. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. But thank you all for answering those questions there. And we'll move over into the panel. So for our panelists, can you share a little bit about your own career path? Did you have an internship when you were a student? And what was your first role out of college?
Do you want to go in any particular order or?
I didn't think about that. No, I guess whoever wants to jump in, and hopefully we won't talk over each other too much.
I'm happy to go first. So I was a little non-traditional with my college path. I did community college for 2 years, so I worked full-time while going to school full-time, and it happened to be in a family business, so I got hands-on accounting experience, bookkeeping. And then I did actually have an internship with a bank my junior year. It's kind of Bank of America now. They went through several iterations. And I do think that that really helped me stand out to get noticed. I joined Johnson & Johnson right out of college, and my first role was internal audit. So that was really exciting. I traveled the world. I had never been anywhere until I joined the organization. So I would go away for like 3-4 weeks at a time and audit the financial controls of a subsidiary of the business. And it really gave me a good handle on doing business in a global environment, dealing with cultural differences, and learning how to communicate with people of different languages. And it really was an excellent start to my career.
I would just jump in. Funnily enough, I worked full-time as well when I was my last 2 years of college. And so I did not have a traditional internship. I ended up getting recruited and starting full-time at Goldman February of my senior year, and recruiting and was recruited and started commuting from Trenton State. Sorry, it's college in New Jersey. Trenton State to me. And I think that work ethic really showed through. And I mean, it's interesting because I think that, to some extent that experience, and I don't know if Kathy's, I think everybody's circumstances are different, but you know, to some extent, I think that resonates a little bit with the current environment, right? I think that I was very fortunate that what got my resume picked up, if you will, in those interviews for full-time positions was that I had been working full-time, right? That there was something of note, that I didn't have the traditional internships that have now become so expected and so competitive. And, you know, I think it speaks to that even then, and I think especially now, there are still alternative paths. And I think that that's one of the things that particularly, you know, students that are facing everyone this summer really is going to have to face some kind of a creative approach, whether that be, I think if you have an internship, you're not going to have a traditional experience based upon what most of my colleagues are presenting to students. And I think if you have no internship, I think, to be honest, if you have no internship, you almost have an incredible opportunity to write your own story from a creative opportunity, from a community outreach perspective. So I think it's exciting, and we can talk about that more, but that was my experience. And similar to Kathy, it makes me a little bit, I think, very optimistic about alternative paths versus traditional.
Yeah, and I love everything you just said there, Jennifer. I think this is a huge opportunity because so many people's stories are going to be turned upside down. Personally, being a phys ed major, I did not have an opportunity via my major to get an internship easily. So I had more traditional summer jobs. I worked at a county park. I worked at Walmart one summer. I cleaned gum off a high school desk for my local high school, another one. And then I worked as a student ambassador giving tours at TCNJ going into my senior year. Best summer of my life, might I add. You know, just getting into a little bit of how did that transition into senior year, I vividly remember fall of my senior year, not a lot of teachers were looking for full-time employment. I thought that was strange because I lived with 3 business majors. 2 guys were studying accounting, 1 was studying finance, and they had interviews booked all fall, you know, to work for banks and other, you know, great name firms, thanks to our TCNJ Career Services. And so I didn't want to sit on my hands. I wanted to look for other opportunities. It was 2010 at that time, so the market still hadn't recovered from the, you know, the financial, the housing crisis. And, you know, my major had gone from 100% job placement down to 40. And we had 100% job placement for 6 consecutive years. And it dropped to 40 overnight, 40%. And so there was no guarantee you were going to get a job in your major. And so I went out, I interviewed for different sales jobs, had a few offers. And then, you know, somebody, you know, I asked my friends, what are you applying for? People that I looked up to. I said, what are you looking to do? And that's when I heard about Teach for America. But again, you know, I now work in sales. I work for IBM, a technology company. I lead a $75 million a year business for IBM. And I never took a business class in my life. So there is definitely an opportunity, as Jennifer just said, to take advantage of the fact that everybody's story is getting kind of turned upside down, and think about what is it that you want and how are you going to go pursue it, and how are you going to take action, take ownership of the process, because that at the end of the day is going to be what makes you stand out.
I'll add one thing to that, Matt. I mean, one of the things that I often find is whenever I engage in something like this, or you know, any kind of community service or whatever, I often play the game of 6 degrees of separation. It is the easiest way to play the networking game. So, you know, you work for IBM, I work for a hedge fund. Most of our people are recruited from IBM. And so you start this conversation, you make the connection, you find somebody, oh, did you know so-and-so? And it's amazing, you know, just how small the world becomes sometimes. And I always find that, you know, it's just easier to make connections than you think it is, you know, if you just put yourself out there a little bit. And I think that, you know, I would encourage students to find that. And I think virtually, you know, I think people's skills are honed to some extent from engaging via social media. You've got to kind of take that in a new way from a professional perspective versus just personally, you know.
Building off of that, I would say the last 2 months for many of us, we've gotten very comfortable with virtual. There was definitely like we did at my firm, we did not do this
Yeah.
in the last 2 months. So I believe that the students, if you're not on LinkedIn, I mean, some of the basic stuff, you should have a profile, connect with your parents' contacts, start connecting with all of your contacts. I've hired some people that have reached out to me through LinkedIn, and they really set themselves apart, had interviews based on that, and then they ended up getting full-time offers. So, you know, sometimes it's overwhelming. You're like, how do I get started? But make sure you're using those social platforms as much as possible.
Yeah, and if I can make an analogy, because that's a great point, Kathleen, and I would definitely encourage people to do the same thing. But analogy is, think about a nightclub. You know, there's two typical ways people get in. Everybody waits in line. You know, the average Joes, they just wait in line, and when my number gets called, I get to go in, right? My place in line. Then there's the celebrities, the people with connections, people with a ton of money. The little rope gets moved and they get to go ahead of everybody else. But then there's a few people that are looking for the third door. And I'm stealing this. This is copyrighted. Alex Behn, I believe is the gentleman's name, who wrote this book called The Third Door. It's about the guys that find the window that's cracked open on the second floor, or find the hole in the wall. It's a different pathway to get to your end goal. So most people are going to wait to figure out, you know, when my number gets called, I'll go in. Some people have the connections, but then there are the people who are willing to reach out, leverage the social platforms, and be able to tell a great story about who they are, what they bring, how they're different, what makes them unique, and how they're going to help the other person on the other end of the phone. And I think if you're able to do that and do it well, you have a very good fighting chance of getting what you want.
That was great. All of those points there. So we mentioned using LinkedIn and beginning to engage and connect with folks online and networking. We actually had a student question come in about how do you know where to apply when you're not quite sure yet what you want to do after graduation? So I don't know if any of you have experience with that yourself, or any advice that you would share. How do you determine where to send your application?
Some of it is there's so much information out on the internet. I mean, my God, so what interests you? I'm sure Career Services at TCNJ even has some probably assessments that can help really guide what you're good at and what you need to do. The nice thing is, with an internship, you can take a risk, try something totally different, because you're trying something out, right? So that's, company gets to view you get to assess them. So I would say, you know, if you even have a thought of something of interest, try and get an internship in that area, because you're not going to know unless you try it.
So can you guys talk about, I know some of your companies have internships, some do not, but can you talk a little bit about how those internships have changed for the summer? And if your company doesn't have internships, what have you been hearing in your network about the changing landscape of internships for the summer?
So we do not have internships at my firm, but I've been talking to a lot of the banks. And so I know they have compressed a lot of the programs to smaller formats, and they have gone virtual. And so I think that's going to be a significant change. It's interesting because I was talking to one of my colleagues today, and one of the things that they had said, which I think could be applied to, you know, everyone, is that they are really encouraging them to put a lot of curriculum into the programs, right? So teach-ins and course load, right? Which, you know, large firms have the ability to provide that, but the reality is there's a lot of those opportunities out there now anyway. I mean, I have 2 daughters in high school, and every college out there right now, right, is offering high school programs virtually, college programs for high schoolers virtually, right, which I think range from normally, I think, very competitive to, you know, less competitive, right? So I think there's a lot of academic opportunities, right, to, you know, build skills out there, which I think is what I think a lot of firms are going to do more so this summer, than more practical hands-on, which is interesting because I think you have the opportunity to do that on your own. I think you can get some of that probably with good mentoring, right? So I think it may be an opportunity to really capitalize on mentoring. You know, I think really, I really speak back to the fact that I think another area that might be an opportunity is, you know, I think small businesses are really going to be in trouble. And, you know, and when I was in grad school at Rutgers, you know, one of the projects we had was consulting with small businesses. And it's a tough avenue to kind of get your foot in the door, I think, as a student. But I think if you have the opportunity to provide a service there through some means, right, where you can at least get some credibility, I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to support small businesses, right? Whether it be through partnerships with professors or through parents or friends of parents. And I mean, I think you're really talking about not just getting an internship where you benefited, but really giving something back to the community. I think there's huge opportunity there that says something about what you did kind of in this time. And sometimes it just takes some real thinking to kind of, and a kick to kind of think about those things and move forward on that. And maybe that has nothing to do with what you end up doing long term, but it says a lot about kind of, you know, who you are as a person.
Yeah, and just jumping in off of that again, I think you gotta leverage LinkedIn, right? One of the things that I think people don't do enough of is ask for informational interviews. So at IBM, we're a 400,000 person company. We have an unspoken policy that I can reach out to any executive within IBM and I can say, hey, I want to understand what it is you do, what's your story, who you are, how did you get from where you were to where you are now, and what advice do you have for me in my career on how, you know, what steps can I take now in order to maybe grow and one day be where you are. And just by making it about the other person, they're going to be more receptive. They're going to be willing to talk to you. And so if you get one of those opportunities, you know, come with a set of questions, just like the panel today. You know, there's a set of questions, and be prepared to just ask the person about their life and see what are the connections, what are the commonalities. Do you have the same personality traits? Maybe they express leadership. Maybe they express drive. Maybe it's a tenacious work ethic. Maybe it's giving back to the community. Whatever it is, find commonality with that other person and talk about it. And, you know, if there are things that are important to you, work-life balance, being able to start a family, traveling, you know, concerns you would have about balancing just, you know, the daily challenges of life. I find the more authentic you can be and the more you can ask about the other person, the better the conversation goes. And another simple analogy to think about when you get an opportunity to speak to someone, 2 ears, 1 mouth. If you're listening twice as much as you're speaking, odds are the conversation is going to go in your favor.
Matt, I think that's excellent advice because somebody had said to me once, you know, people love to talk about themselves, right? And I think and I think really, I think listening to that, there is often something that you can take away. And I think that people are going to really be open to those kinds of conversations. It's low risk for them. And I think there really is a lot of opportunity for that. I think that's a really good opening with people for sure.
So at management planning, where I'm at, we actually we have about 5 internship positions. 2 of the folks are already started. 3 will join us right after Memorial Day. We are going 100% virtual. This is very unusual for us. Very structured. So I worked with the program manager in my HR capacity to really come up with the plan for the 12 weeks. So we're not shortening it, but it's going to require a lot more like virtual interaction with the interns because we're assessing them for full-time hire as well. So we have to make sure that we get a good feel, you know, for culture fit, work ethic capabilities as well. So I had to spend a lot more time than I usually do in preparing for the interns to start.
Kathy, did you guys come up with screen sharing technology, third party or other, to use to actually get them students trained for internships?
We use Microsoft Teams.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, a lot of it's going to be current analysts are going to train them, and then we have a certificate program that we enroll them all in. But that's going to, we're going to use existing technology.
I've heard that repeatedly though, but so for people on the, for the students on the call, that may be something that's worthwhile to look into. I have heard the banks using Microsoft Teams as something that people are using during this virtual time to kind of take a look at.
Yeah, so if you're comfortable with Skype, it's very similar, it's very similar. But definitely get yourself comfortable with it. If you know how to use Zoom, you can use any of those technologies.
Yeah, and I know at IBM, we're still doing the summer internships. Interestingly enough, my job is to sit on my client sites 3 days a week. And so we have folks coming in for sales internships. And so they're going to see how our whole business shifts digital. And so I'm still, having calls with procurement and with the CIO and different folks in IT and the line of business at my clients. And those interns are going to have the opportunity to sit alongside, again, virtually. And we tend to use an IBM Slack, which is a peer to Microsoft Teams competing platform. And then again, we'll use, whatever the client has, or we'll use Zoom, whatever platform. So it's definitely shifted online. And I think that IBM will have another very scripted summer, just like what you folks are saying as well.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing from our employer partners as well. Either it's all virtual or it's maybe been shortened. So rather than 8 weeks, it's 6 weeks or 4 weeks. There are a few that have switched it to be more of professional development workshops, but then they get priority, like recruiting and interviewing for full-time next year or for an internship again the next summer. So it's interesting to just hear from other companies what you all are doing. We did have another student question come in. What do you think might be qualities right now that recruiters are looking for an intern in the midst of this pandemic? Are there any certain qualities that you think are important for our students to showcase during this pandemic?
I think technical skills and communication skills.
Yep. And proven, I would say some type of proven track record that you're good on follow-up, keeping people informed of where you're at on, a workload. Having a teacher recommendation, a professor recommendation would be fabulous if you don't have relevant work experience. I think it was a TCNJ student came to interview a few months ago. I was very impressed. He came in with a resume that had references, and he came in with some examples of, like projects that he felt was relevant to the internship at hand. I had never, in my 30 years of interviewing someone, had a student come with that, and he really stood out to me. So think about that. Have some, kind of preordained references on your resume, and come with relevant work product.
Yeah, again, to me, that's preparedness, right? And taking the time to think through, if you were in the shoes of the person sitting across the table or on the other side of the screen these days, what is it that's going to make you stand out? What is it, right? Like a great example, is that difficult to do? Think through projects, coursework you've done, and say, hey, here are 3 or 4 things I've done, and here's how I think it's relevant to what we're going to be doing, or I'm going to be doing in this role at X client company, and here's how I think it can help you. No, it just takes a little bit of creativity. It takes a little bit of time, and it takes being a little bit vulnerable, right? Because you're taking a calculated risk. You're saying, here's some of the things I've done, and maybe the person on the other side of the phone will be like, well, I don't really see the connection, right? You might fail, but it's a calculated risk, and most likely, I think, again, it'll put you in a good light, make you stand out. And I think it's pretty incredible that we're hearing a CFO say she hadn't seen somebody do something like that in 30 years, because I think it's something we're all capable of doing. So again, just encourage you to think outside the box. And one of the things I think young people struggle with is they like to talk about what they do versus who they are. What you do is, just a function of your day-to-day. Who you are is what makes you unique. And so think about your lived experience. And I think especially right now, looking at COVID, we all are home, right? So we're all kind of going through a similar experience. Yes, some people have different challenges, whether it's caring for older family members, caring for children, you know, having to commute in if you're a doctor, a medical professional, or essential worker every day. Different folks are experiencing different challenges, but at the end of the day, we're all going through something as part of this continuum related to COVID-19. And so if you're spending your time, you know, mostly sitting on the couch watching TV, it's going to be hard to get that interviewer to you know, connect with you. But if you're saying, hey, I went online, I took online courses, or, you know, I'm volunteering virtually, or however you can, right? But I'm taking action, and I'm not just staying idle. I'm somehow doing something to benefit myself or benefit the community. I think if we can say things like that, we're going to be putting ourselves in a better light than the competition.
Okay, wasn't sure if there was any additional things there. Okay.
I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, look, I think that to your point, Matt, I think you have a real opportunity to show future employers really who you are, because this summer, if you will, you know, you get to really invest some time in something you're really passionate about, right? Really. I mean, you know, just speaking about my own personal experience, like I have again, I said I had 2 high school daughters, and my one daughter has thrown herself into, you know, thrown her energy into writing, right? She's taking writing workshops. She's started to put on some writing contests with the local library. And like, you know, I think the earlier question was about, you know, we were talking about kind of matching how you find the right fit. And she really found what was the fit for her, right? I don't know if I made the perfect parallel for that earlier question, but I think you really have to find that, right? I think that really, you have to find what resonates for you. And I think in life, it's not always that easy, right? Because you have to find something that also ends up being a job, right? A professional career. But now I think you get a little bit more wiggle room, right? Because I think you can really find something that feeds your soul. I think maybe I'm overstating that, but the optimist in me does feel like there's a window of opportunity to kind of take a look at the world around you and do something that maybe makes a difference that, you know, some other, you know, summer job might not do.
Okay, another student submitted question. What are the best questions to ask an interviewer at the end of an interview?
Well, for me personally, it really, do your homework on the company, really come up with something thoughtful and thought-provoking. Most times, I'm not overly impressed with the questions that the interns ask. It's basic information, and you can tell that majority of them do not do their homework on the company. So I just think taking 15, 20 minutes, you know, reading up on the company website, finding something they've published or have been public about, asking a question around that, just unique, and to me, you should have a good half dozen to a dozen questions. Many times I find the interns or the candidates will ask 1 or 2 questions, and you know, it's the wow factor. I'm not wowed, right? I want to see that you've done your homework.
I would agree with that. It does not take much to impress, but I think the amount of homework people do is usually limited.
Non-existent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to add, I think when I was going through the process, and I remember this kind of vividly because it was unusual for me to be going into these business interviews. Like, for example, I applied to News America Marketing, which I know has hired probably 100 TCNJ grads over the years. That's owned by News Corp, parent of Fox News. And I remember going into just thinking through the questions I wanted to ask, and I didn't do my homework. And, you know, I kind of looked at it like checking the box. and it's probably the worst way to look at, how you should ask questions. Like if you're not actually intrigued about either the person on the other side of the phone, the company you're going to work for, the position you're going to be applying to, you're probably applying for the wrong position or you haven't thought about it enough. So again, I'd look at it organically, like naturally, like what is it that you want to know? Don't look at it like, oh, I asked 3 questions. When I work with career services, we talk about how, you want to have 2 or 3 good questions at the end. No, like make it really like organic. What is it that you want to know? And you can be candid. You can be, I don't want to use the word unfiltered, but you can be very direct and forthright. And I think, again, that makes people stand out. I think today more than ever, people are sick of the gimmicks. They're sick of being lied to. They want to meet authentic people. And I think when you can have an authentic conversation, you make a connection. And again, the more questions you ask, the more you're going to learn about that person. And then when you answer, the more likely you're going to be able to tailor your answer towards the, what information you were able to glean from the questions you asked. So don't wait until the end of an interview. You should be asking questions throughout the entire process. And if you're not doing it, it's probably because you're uncomfortable. So practice. Grab your mom, grab your dad, grab a friend. When I went to global sales school, I went from teaching to selling. And I think this analogy will help. In teaching, I was standing up, I was talking for 45 minutes, leading, a class, and I had 90-minute periods. God help me, that was crazy. So I had to talk for 45 straight minutes, give a lecture, and that's not what sales is. Sales is asking great questions. And so when I went to global sales school, my sales advisor actually pulled me aside and had me sit down with another person on my team who was struggling to answer questions. And so all I was allowed to do was ask questions, and all she was allowed to do was answer them. And so collectively, we worked together, and we were able to build up the skills and our weaknesses and work on that stuff. So I'd say, yes, questions are so very important in the interview process.
Well, and on the back of that, I would encourage, I tell everybody that I'm, coaching from an interview perspective is, do not forget that you are interviewing that company as well. Like they are interviewing you, but you are interviewing them to make sure that it is appropriate cultural fit and that it is a job that you want. So those questions are not just to check the box, but they are to make sure that it is someplace that you want to work with, people that you want to work with, at a culture an organization that is a culture that you want to be a part of. So, if that helps empower you, think about it in that way. I totally agree though with Kathy's point about, I think you have to have those questions that show you did your homework, which really just get you appropriate points. But there should be questions in there that are things that really matter to you as well personally, to make sure that it's a place that you want to work as well. So I agree with all of those points. I think those are really important, good points.
And if you're networking, this is another important one. So if you're reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn and maybe they work for a company that you're interested in, maybe they have a role that interests you, you want to ask, who else do you recommend that I speak with? And try to expand the network through somebody else's network. Most likely, if you had a good call and they feel like you're a positive person and you have something to contribute, they'll plug you in somewhere and keep you moving along.
Matt, I've got a good question for you for the students. What do you think is the easiest way to get somebody to reply to you on a blind LinkedIn solicitation?
2 ways. One, you need something in the headline that's going to grab their attention, because most of us, I think, are inundated with LinkedIn notes. I don't know about you guys now, and before all this, it's recruiters, it's a bunch of spam, right? LinkedIn offers, et cetera. But if somebody says, time to catch up, or, just something that's casual but personal in the headline, I think that grabs you. And then in the body, again, make it about the other person. I noticed that you went to X college. I noticed that you had this position. I noticed you started out in California and now you live in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Pull something out that's publicly there on their LinkedIn profile, put it in, ask a good question and say, can I have 15 minutes? Can I have 30 minutes of your time to talk to you about it? And guess what? They may not respond to you. I'm actually coaching 2 kids in Chicago. I shouldn't say kids. They're both young adults in their first job. One is working in supply chain right now, and he wants to go work for the Department of Defense, or he wants to work for like a Lockheed Martin. He has very few companies that he wants to work for. So he actually started reaching out and found someone by doing a LinkedIn search who lives in Dallas. He wants to move to Dallas, works for Lockheed Martin. And it took 3 or 4 notes, but it got the conversation going. She connected him with other people, He already has an application in via a recruiter there. And now he's kind of, again, skipping that regular line of just submitting his application online, and he's moving up in the process. And he's not done there. Now he's reaching out to other folks. Hey, I talked to so-and-so in this department. Would love to hear about your experience. So I think the more of that you do, it's kind of just like a snowball effect. It creates momentum. And then go figure, he applied online to Molson Coors because that's another company in Milwaukee that he was interested in. And just, fate, just happened to say, hey, we want to interview you next week. And guess what? He just had his hours cut this week. So because he's out there taking action, he's doing things, he's creating his own luck. And by doing that, even though he just got furloughed, he doesn't feel terrible. He doesn't feel dejected. He feels like he's making progress every day.
Just one thing I did want to add to the interview process is I've had some really great conversations with really personable, outgoing candidates. In my role, we do ask technical questions, and folks will come and they can't even tell me what the financial statements are. So my advice to, I don't care what level you are in your schooling, is you got to know some of the basics, the foundation, and prepare and assume that you're going to be asked technical questions. I've been so disappointed a few times because they were such great candidates, great personalities, great culture fit, but if you can't tell me what the financial statements are, I'm sorry, I just can't put you forward in the process. So another kind of tip for folks.
Yeah, I think one thing that I try to remind students, and we've actually had a few that I've answered offline here, but just when do you follow up with someone? I think a lot of our students are nervous about seeming like a pest versus just, sometimes things get hidden in people's inboxes, and following up a week later is totally appropriate. So thank you, Matt, too, for also sharing that story of that sometimes it does take a lot in order to get in touch with someone.
Be assertive.
Yeah.
That shows a lot. That shows a lot of ambition as well. I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm in sales, and if you're not asking for time, your competition is, and they're getting their foot in the door. So, no is just another word. And look, if they haven't told you no, or please, let's let this go, or I'll get back to you, give me 2 to 3 weeks. If they're not giving you a time frame, you can ask for the time frame. Hey, it's been a week, haven't heard back from you. What would be a good time to follow up? Ask them with what they're comfortable with. That's a good way to take the pressure off, not be annoying. But if you're not getting a response, it's either you're messaging or it's simply because the person is, busy. And I make a living out of networking with people, and I'm shocked at how many people I actually feel bad because I feel like I haven't gotten back to them quick enough. So it's kind of like the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So just keep reaching out. If you're overdoing it, somebody's going to let you know.
And maybe try snail mail. Maybe try something non-traditional.
I still love snail mail. I would totally agree.
Yeah. And
If you
send
can
thank
figure
you
out,
notes.
Yes.
Let me ask a quick question on that, Kathy. If somebody's not in the office, right? Like if we're all working from home, normally snail mail goes to your corporate address. Is there any way to do snail mail in today's work environment?
Well, I know we still get our mail. We have a person that picks up the mail, and he'll scan items. So you could still send mail and assume somebody's getting the mail.
I'm trying. We don't have currently any other student questions. So I'm trying to think back to what students, we've talked about networking. Yeah.
One of the other points that came up when I was talking to one of my colleagues, I'll just share, was about 2 points. And a lot of the students on the call were looking for internships, but they were points about internships that I'll share anyway, were that in these unprecedented times, 2 points that were worth giving some serious thought to were how to manage feedback, making sure there was a plan for when to appropriately seek feedback. So what was the opportunity? Should we be meeting monthly? Should we be meeting weekly? Should there be a one-on-one? So kind of having a schedule for that. And I think, and just understanding what the routine was for that. And I think, and the forum. And I think the second one that we had talked about was the most appropriate format to provide feedback and constructive feedback, right? This is unprecedented. And so there are things that we're going to be doing that don't work, right? That we've not done before and aren't working. And I think one of the points that my colleague had mentioned was that the way to stand out, and I think this resonates with a lot of what Kathy was saying, is that I think it's fine to point out those things, but you want to come with solutions, right? Recommendations when you're highlighting those things, not just highlighting what's not working, but coming with recommendations for what could work or what could work better, right? So I think those are just some ideas that had been kicked around in conversations I've had about the new normal for this summer that might be worth some consideration.
The only other, just some thoughts that I had, at one time I had my own business. There are a lot of hourly job sites out there, like Flex Jobs, Upwork, that could be a source. Someone could be an independent consultant as a summer internship position and look at opportunities on hourly job sites as something really different. So Flex Jobs is one site that I'm aware of, and there's many more. I'm happy to give you a list of different links that I've investigated as I kind of had my own consulting business. So I would say those non-traditional, and I would also, if people are looking for internships and they're willing to do unpaid work, making contact with local nonprofits as well.
For sure. I know a lot of fourth graders that are going to need tutoring this summer, if anyone's available for that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even going to the small business idea, like I also run my own small business on the side around career coaching, interview coaching. So first off, Emily has my contact information. I'm happy to help anybody on this phone call. If you have need interview coaching, it's something I'm passionate about, I'm happy to do that. But even as a small business owner, like I would love it if somebody had web developer skills and wanted to spend some time optimizing my website for me. I'd be willing to write them a glowing letter of recommendation, and also at the same time, give them the career advice and the career coaching, and open them up to my network and how I can help them. TCNJ has a ton of, folks that have gone through the digital space, and I have friends and contacts in that space. So, just think through your skill set. It doesn't even have to be your major. Like I said, I was a phys ed major, right? Like think through what your major is, what your skill set is, what you're interested in, and reach out to people. And one final comment I'd like to make is I'm looking at my refrigerator because I've had this thing pinned to it for the last 6 years. It's literally a diagram. It's called the 49 personality archetypes, and I'll send this information over to Emily so she can get out to you. But I had the pleasure of listening to Sally Hogshead, Phonetic, Hogshead, talk at a IBM conference in 2014. And it's all about how to market yourself, who you are, and how to describe yourself. She actually gives you adjectives. And so the beauty of it is everybody falls into one of these 49 personality archetypes. So it will help you with words for your resume, for your cover letters, and help you speak about who you are in your interviews. So I'd highly recommend checking her out as well.
Okay. The only other question that we have students submitted is just if you're applying to a job that has technical skills that are involved, how do you know what will be expected in the interview?
Well, so I'll use MPI as an example. Dr. Patrick offers a class on valuation. So, and he used to intern with us or do consulting work. I would go talk to the professor, say, hey, you offer this class, what can I do to find out a little bit more about preparing for this role? most technical jobs in the finance and accounting space are going to be using Excel. So demonstrating Excel knowledge and awareness of how to use Excel. You know, like a Wall Street prep course is pretty common. Folks can look that up. But it's basically, do you know how to analyze financial statements, and do you know how to take data and put it into Excel?
Yeah, I think one of the important things I try to impress with students is that the interview is not a test, right? Like just how Matt, or I think Jennifer, you were saying, it's a conversation. It's you get to figure out if you're interested in this company and this role, and the company is doing the same thing. And most times I would say they're not out to trick you, right? So they want to know what your experience is, and especially when it's going for an internship. There are some that do require tests that are taken or case study type answers that happen. But again, they're not trying to trick you. They're just trying to evaluate where you are in terms of your skill level there. So we have 2 minutes left. I don't know if there's any final words anyone has to say, or anything that we didn't quite cover that you want to share with the students.
I would say, similar to what Jennifer and Matt have talked about, is this is a new uncharted territory. Take this time, if there isn't a job available for you, to really, there's so many free courses out there. So depending on your major, look at what type of advanced training, anything for data analytics. I mean, we're talking about the School of Business. If you're moving into marketing, do you know what CRM is? Get some training on some tools like Salesforce, Trailhead, you know, so really look into relevant tools that are used within that discipline and just take some free online courses. I know personally, one person I hired as a co-op, I really liked that she went on and did some extra coursework on data analytics. I felt that it was relevant to the role at hand. Just continue to get your education, or look at some unpaid internships with family and friends.
And I'd just like to jump in on that too. I spoke to a marketing class at TCNJ a few years ago, and I asked the classroom, what are some of the most important KPIs? And this was senior year, junior year, sophomore year, you know, in marketing. And the professor interrupted me and said, Matt, we don't use acronyms here. I go, I'm sorry, key performance indicators. And nobody could tell me what the key performance indicators, you know, that marketers care about. Just do a Google search on the area you're interested in and say, you know, accounting KPIs, marketing KPIs, finance KPIs. Know what those are. It's just, again, shows you've done your homework, shows you're interested in the space. And I think just to sum all this up, right, it's activity. My boss asked me on Monday during our cadence call, what are the 2 things you want to accomplish this week to move the needle? What are the 2 most important things? So I'd ask you to ask yourself that question as well. What are 2 things you're going to do this week, you know, between now and Friday, that if you look back on Friday, you'll be like, I'm really glad I did that. And I think if you do that week in, week out, you'll make progress. You'll feel good.
I agree. I have nothing else really to add, other than I think, you know, I think you're welcome to share our information. I think we're, at least for myself, available. If anybody wants to reach out with other questions and advice, we're always available. I'm always available to the students, and happy to take questions offline. We put these this out to students, and a very small percentage take us up on it. So always happy to do it, help in any way.
Thank you.
And kudos to TCNJ for making these type of webinars available.
Yeah, I hope it was helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I can't thank you all enough too. I know that there was a quick turnaround here, so thank you so much for sitting in on this. I really do. I think that it was helpful for the students, and we have about 30 that were on, so that's fantastic for us. So thank you so much again. Thank you to our students who have been listening in. Again, if you do have any questions, you can always reach out to Nicole or I, and we can connect you to our panelists. But thank you all again so much, and I hope you have a lovely evening and a great week.
Yep, thank you.
Great Cinco de Mayo.
Thank you, exactly.
Bye.
Bye.